Niharika, can you share the PPT? So I'd like to start my presentation with thanking Professor Sangeeta Menon because of for her current constant support, love, encouragement. Without it's not possible. And as you can see that my topic, its title is a wide-eyed man in the capital of black magic, Vicharika. So just I'll give a background about this topic. But before giving a background, I would like to, Niharika, can you go to the next slide? I would like to officially acknowledge the contribution made by the many people. No, like Professor Sangeeta Menon, I have already mentioned. Professor Basant Sindhi, under his guidance, I have completed my master dissertation on the same topic. Dr. Saida Ansari, without her constant support, encouragement, and co-guidance, this was not possible. Meera Menon for chairing this session. Hari Krishnan MD for various kinds of discussion and modeling, and Nya CSP team for all the supports, technical supports, Niharika, Abhishek Aswani, and Tata Trust for funding this project. So just next slide, Niharika. So I'll give just a small background about this topic. This topic is centered on one of a village. It's called Mayang in its Moregaon district, Assam. So this title suggests that a white-eyed man at the capital of black magic. So when somebody hears this topic, black magic, the first question I used to get that is it real? Is it existing? Does it exist? What is black magic? What is the difference between black magic and white magic? Is black magic a reality or a myth? What is the importance of black magic in the information is? So giving this what is black magic first, I will try to give this first, answer those questions during this presentation. Does it exist or not? Or is it myth or reality? So I'll start from this because this question arises. What I found this question arises because of there is a contrast in our thinking process between the magical causality and the physical causality. Magical causality, what I mean by magical causality basically it violates the known laws of principles and conventions of physical, biological, psychological, and all kinds of behavior or ground. So medical causality in that sense, when it violates the physical principles and conventions, so it has two parts. One has this magical thinking, and another has this magical, what you call the magical belief. So magical thinking, what I mean by it's basically a psychological term, is mostly used in psychology, where it's the mental process of supernatural characters, assumptions, and all. In this process, what people do, people basically concept of impossible object. They used to concept impossible object without any ontological judgment about the subject. So in this process, in magical thinking process, there is a scope for imagination, perception, thinking, and all. Whereas on the other hand, magical belief, it incorporates the ontological judgment about the impossible object of the belief. It has the ontological judgment associated with the object. So it's always dealing with the existence and non-existence in the world, and therefore, if it deals with the existence and non-existence, so it believes that the magic has the real effect on the world. So, but again, the question arises that does it exist? So it has it can be answered from various models, does it exist or does not. So if you apply this logical empiricist model of this Chryson of demarcation by this Carnap and all, where he says that a statement is logically meaningful if and only if it is in principle and possible to verify. But on the other hand, if we try to apply this Karl Popper's falsificationist proposal, where he says that a falsifiable claim has also scientific and the philosophical context, and he goes on and says that the empirical evidence has insufficiency or incompleteness for giving any theory which is likely to be true or is true, because he said that empirical evidence are insufficient to either falsify or give it theory of truth. This is true or this is false in this kind of. This is not only that Karl Popper believe that, even logicians like Gordon and all have proposed that truth is always greater than the proof through the man. He says that magic, when is called or in any truth per se, is all based on axioms, and axioms, without axioms you cannot prove anything, because you cannot prove something out of nothing. So for axioms, but here in this case, if you try to apply this logician model in magic, basically magic based on this experience and knowledge, or experience, this qualia, can we come up with axioms for qualia? If we come up with axioms for qualia, then we can falsify or disfalsify. But since magic or black magic, any kind of magic. So we cannot come up with the axiom. So it's very difficult to tell us whether it's true or false, myth or reality, existing, non-existing. So, but now the question comes, then what is magic? So for me, if I define magic, so it is related to human intended force and conformative will to control, channel, direct the unwanted disaster in life, or whether it's caused by nature or by person. But various authors in anthropology. Can you go to the next slide, Yarika? So various authors or various research scholars from anthropology has defined magic in various terms. So before I define what is black magic, so let's ask this question: what is magic? How is magic different from religion? What is the antiquity of magic? Does this concept of magic have significant effect on human economics, sociology, creativity, and all? So what these anthropologists have done, I'll start with the Taylor. So Taylor has defined magic as an inferior form of primitive religion. So more inferior form of primitive religion, whereas James George Fraser in his very famous book Golden Bough, he defines magic as the earliest stage of the civilized religion, antecedents to God and religion. But if you read Durkheim's account, so Durkheim has very nicely, he has categorized this magic and religion in the form of organization. Can you go to the next slide, Yanika? In organization. So Durkheim goes on and he said that every society there exists two distinguishable domain, that is sacred and profane. And then he classified this magic and religion under the sacred and profane. He classified all the mundane activity, including science also. And he defined this, and he differentiate between this sacred and profane through the following observations. He said that the magic and religion have traditional acts and observation carried out with reverence and awe, hazed around with the prohibition and special rules of behavior associated with this belief in supernatural force. Whereas the science is careful observation of natural process, a firm belief in its regularity, confidence in the power of reasoning, and he gives example of hunting or any kind of scientific activity or production behavior. So in this sense, he has given differentiated between these two things. And Malinowski, after another anthropologist who followed this Durkheim's categorization of sacred and profane, and he goes on and gives he talks about the functional aspects of magic and religion. And in functional aspects of magic and religion, he follows this Freudian psychology, and he says that magic and religion all arises and functions in the situation where in the situation of emotional stress, or in the situation where no empirical way out, like in life, in crisis in life, lacuna in a pursuit and all. So in that sense, he found this it's very psychological way, no empirical way out. And then he differentiate between magic and religion with various demarcation he have given. He says that magic is a practical art, and it has definite means and definite ends, whereas religion is a self-conscious act. It's with complex aspects and purposes. And then religion has also another important feature which has it is a affair which is open to all, whereas this magic is very private and individualistic kind of behavior, where this it has to be handed over with direct felicitation from one generation to another generation. So in that sense, magic is categorized as a larger domain, and religion as a larger domain and magic as a smaller domain, and very individualistic, private kind of thing. And then again he goes on and another differentiation. He says that the religion has no distinction like good religion, bad religion, whereas magic has very good like distinction like black magic, white magic, good magic, bad magic. Especially, I'm not very comfortable with using word black magic, but since we are tuned in a way that if I use this word avicharika, then I have to again explain all these things, and then it might be difficult for people to understand. So therefore, I have choose both the word using simultaneously, black magic and avicharika. I'll define what black magic is. But for me, but what later anthropologists disagree. This magic and religion as two separate entities. And then I also, for some sense, I disagree with this reason, because for early men, magic and religion were almost similar. Can you go to the next slide? Because when we go for this, see that how this magic was functioning in the earlier society, not primitive, I cannot say primitive. So like earlier society, earlier existing society. So we have seen that magic, there is a very unbridgeable gap between this knowledge and power of control. So we have seen this magic always where we have no control over this result or chance or circumstances. So where there is a conflict between plan and a real outcome. So magic. So when what happened after that? It was there when human were hunter gatherers, or technology was not so much developed. So we do not have the control over this outcome. So a very unaccountable result was like it used to happen like. But what happens when technology started approaching the culture? So then production was associated with the technology. Magic was never associated with production. For example, I'll give. So we have always seen that nobody taught how to cook food is related to magic. So and how to grow vegetables is related to magic. So or how to tame, how to make fire is related to magic. So this kind of production or how to make a tools is related to magic. So production was never related to magic. But when but there is a difference in there, subtle difference here that. But whenever this something is beyond our control, like suppose, or something is beyond our capacity, like suppose when you tame a cow or a dog, it does not relate to magic. But when you tame a tiger or a lion, so people associate this kind of behavior with the magic, because it is for a certain level it's very impossible, like impossible kind of activity is done by activity or art. So in that sense, so what happened? Technology when approached this production, so people started dissociating this line, like magic and like magic was separated from this technology and culture. Can you go to the next slide? Uh, so now the concept comes. Then what is black magic? Why there is black magic? We can use this word black only magic. Why this black magic or white magic? So what I found in this concept of black and white is very Western centric concept, because they connecting the color with the connotative meaning. Still in Western centric custom with black, we always connotate with this negative, bad, inauspicious, whereas this white is connected with very positive vibes and all. But when we look our Indian tradition, there is no such difference between white and black magic. For Indian tradition, in black magic or witchcraft, there is a word called avicharika, which is in literal meaning of avicharika, it means one who follows, like servant kind of. Like if you go by literal means of avicharika is servant in that sense. And then there are 6 kind of abhicharika, starting from the Stambhan to Vidvesh to Maran, Mohan, and Uchatan, Vasikaran. And so in that, these are all the categorization under the abhicharika, what all comes under the abhicharika. So, and then now the question comes, then where is the point of differentiation between this good magic and bad magic, black magic? For me, if I'll tell personally, so differentiation comes at the level of intention. When somebody wants to do something good with their art, magical art, or the power, so this can be categorized into good magic. Whereas this, when you try to harm somebody with your magical power or supernatural power, this can be categorized into this black magic. Can you go next slide? So another question. Since I am from archaeology background, so I started looking from always think from the historical point of view, from history and archaeology. I look and evidence, and then I'll talk about in that sense. So is it possible to go back and find out where its black magic originates and this? So for in the right hand, left hand side, the topmost. So this is a rock art from this Panchmari Hill, MP, and this is from rock art is of Upper Paleolithic period. So here you can see that one chakra is there, some anthropomorphic figure has been drawn along with one stick, white color stick. So and in this I have categorized this particular rock art for black magic. Why I categorize in black magic, I'll discuss in the later slide. Another evidence we found in one of the excavation, Jorwe culture excavation, like it's Chalcolithic period excavation from Maharashtra, a site called Inamgaon. This date goes back to this 1400 BC to 1100 BC. So what is the specification of this burial? So this burial was buried with by chopping the feet. So before burying this dead, they used to chop the feet and then they used to bury. The belief system, the ethnographic data and belief system shows that they used to chop this belief because they used to believe in ghosts. So if there will be no leg, so the spirit cannot come out from this grave and harm people. So because for that, they used to cut the leg of this skeleton or dead, and then they used to bury. This was not only central to India in particular. This kind of activity was found in other part of in Europe. If you say this, UK, a site called Iron Age site called Willside, date goes back to the 700 BC to 413 CE. There also this kind of behavior has been like observed. And not only that, people have like in his book Geology of Religion, Edward Clifford has talks about this color is also associated with this magical power, and he has described this color with the sympathetic kind of magic, and he categorizes magic into three categories like imitative, contagious, and homeopathic. And he says that homeopathic magic deals with this like for like a whole part can be symbolized the whole. Like for in this case here, if you see the left hand side down image, so here you have an ochre color, he like what Clifford described as a symbol for blood or blood for earth. So for that kind of things can be observed from this prehistoric or early historic prehistoric sense or RNA sense or megalithic sense. Can you go to the next slide, Niharika? Niharika, can you go now? Yeah. Now comes to the question of after this Paleolithic period. So I have excluded this proto-historic period. People have also associated this Indus Valley seal of Pasupata. I think everybody must have seen this Pasupata seal and all. They have tried to also associate this Pasupata seal or the seal found during the Kalibangan expedition, called human sacrifice. Well, a scholar like Upender Singh and all have described about this. But what I like, but from the when this credible kind of evidence has started getting from this Atharvaveda. Atharvaveda has 8 sections. Atharvaveda has been categorized into 8 sections, and one of the sections deals with avicharika practice. So in that sense, we found this evidence of Vicharika practice in our Vedic culture itself in Atharvaveda, and it goes back to 900 BC to 700 BC. Especially in Kausiki Sutra of Atharvaveda, is it's very much deals with this kind of magical behavior or magical practice or beliefs in supernatural powers. And after that Vedic period, we have also found the evidence of magic or stories of magic in Ramayana, for example, Marich, in Mahabharata, Ghatotkacha, in Pali texts also, this Anguttara Nikaya, Khuddaka Nikaya and all, various kinds of like our historical text has deals with this magic in great detail. But now the problem comes when then how this magic is associated with Tantrism. So when this religion started, like very codified kind of religion started propagating in the land, then magic again, which was separated with the use of technology, again fused with this tradition, and then magic and Tantrism get infused. So we can see in the Kapalika and Kalamukha sect of Saivism is very much believes in magical and tantric practices. Vajrayana and Mantrayana sect of Buddhism also believes in that tantric Shaktism. Even Vaishnavism, Vaishnavan Sajjisa, which is 13th century religion, propagated started from this Bengal and all. And even Ganpati also. It's very surprising also, even Ganpati is also associated with this magical practices. So Ganesha, this specific kind of Ganesha like Mahaganpati or Uchishta Ganpati was always been associated with this black magic practices. So when I was in Banaras, I went to this temple called Kinaram temple. The picture you are seeing is picture from Kinaram temple, Banaras. So this was very much, it's a popular place for this Kapalika and Kalamukha sect of Saivism. So this kind of people here, there's all Aghoris who believes in black magic or black magic or Avicharika practice. They do finance all the tantric kinds of cults they used to practice there. So I had the opportunity, if anybody is from Banaras and is went to this, you can share your experience after this finishing out. Can you go to this next slide? So now comes to this my actual field work where this research was centered. So this research was centered in a place called Mayong. It's a village in Moregaon district, Assam. Just to give a little bit idea about geographical placement of this. This village was surrounded by hills and hillocks, and small hills and hillocks, and these hillocks are called Kapchosila, and river and riverines like starting from this river Brahmaputra to this river Kalong and Soni and Padika, all kind of like, and it was very near to this. It's very Pabitoda Wildlife Sanctuary. Actually it's in this village is inside that Pabitoda Wildlife Sanctuary itself. And in our ancient text talks about this Mayong was the part of one of the 4 geographical division of ancient Kamrupa. Kamrupa is the older name of Assam, and it's called as a Kampitha. In Kampitha, its origin, when we go for this nomenclature of Mayong, it's very interesting. And then if I start talking all the stories associated with the nomenclature of Mayong, it will take one more lecture. So I will just give a few stories of what is the Mayong means and what is the nomenclature of this Mayong. So Mayong is traditionally known as Mayan. So scholars have, linguistics and scholars have derived this word Ma Yang. Ma means mother and Yang means this body part. So, and then we all know this Kamakhya temple, one of the Shakti Peeth. This temple is associated with this yoni of this goddess. So in that sense, Ma Yang means this body part of mother. So in that sense, the yoni or prakriti, because it's associated with the nearby, just 40 kilometers away from this Kamakhya temple. So one story goes like this kind of analogy. And the second story like is Mayang is what derived from word Maya. Maya is illusion. So it's people are very Mayavi there, so they have derived this word Maya. Another story goes like this: there was a spirit Maya along with the spirit Badvi, and they were living in the tree in the village, and they used to cause harm. So on the name of that spirit, this village was named as Mayang. Can you go to this next slide? So just give a little bit historiography of the Mayang. What is the history of Mayang itself? So in oral narrations, people talks that in Mahabharata, from reference goes back to this Mahabharata period and tells that Ghatotkacha and Hidimba was ruling this period, this area of Kamrupa. And but credible evidence started getting from this Gupta period, this 4th to 7th century BC. Allahabad pillar inscription largely talks about this Kamrupa, and then various Palaj inscription. Pala dynasty has ruled there, Ahom dynasty has ruled there, Koch dynasty has ruled there. So during all this ruling dynasty, various kinds of religious sect has developed and flourished in this Mayang. So starting religion like Vajrayana, Buddhism, or Saivism, Shaktism, Vaishnavism, Ganpat, Asthanapai, and now after this British Christianity was also there. So and then when we go for this historical record, so the Prasad Bhulanji of Ahom Chronicle talks largely about this Mayang's magical power, the various stories like of magical power, and then other account, this Alamgirnama of 13th century or 14th century, he talks about this one of this Aurangzeb's Alamgirnama talks this Muhammad Shah in 1337 CE like invaded this Kamrupa region with 1 lakh soldiers, and people from the Kamrupa has perished. Though 1 lakh soldiers in the land, and not a single trace of that their soldiers was recovered. Not only this Alamgirnama talks about this magical power. Another account of Siabuddin also talks about this magical power possessed by the people from that place. Can you go to the next? So now comes to this: what is the structure of magic, black magic in Mayang, past and present? What is this? So we have seen this Mayang was a very complex cultural landscape where various dynasties had ruled, various kinds of religious sects have flourished, and a heterogeneous belief because of this religious heterogeneous beliefs have flourished. So this Gaon has a tradition of Gaon Bura, or which is Beige, Oja, occult therapist. You can name it like that. So what is this job of this Beige and Oja? So this is the people who knows this various kinds of mantras and used to basically, now it is, earlier it was people used to say that they used to do black magic also, but now it is mostly this magic was centered and to this magico-medicinal practices, and then people are very reluctant to say also, even if they know also this black magic, they do not come forward and tell that yeah, they know black magic and they can do black magic, or they can harm people with their help of magical powers. So in this village, they are, along with this, all these 6 avicharikas which I have talked about, this Astamba, Vidvesa, Maran, Mohan, Uchatan, Vasikaran, all this. So various kinds of prophecies are also there. The prediction with weather, prediction with bird, prophecy, like forecast of with arrow. This Ban practices very much there. Like there are various kinds of Bans they used to practice, like starting from this Langra Ban to Bekli Ban to Ragmi Ban. So all kinds of Ban which are able to cause different kinds of disease in the persons. So these kinds of, even in ghost and shadow. So there are various kinds of medical practices which we can name, and it's practiced somehow, some form or another form it is practiced there. So next slide. And one more important thing about this magic practices is that in religions we need a special priest who can chant mantra. But here is any capable people from any caste, any religion, any color, creed, you can now color. So you can, and if they are capable, they can practice this black magic. So there is no such kind of bond. So if a person is capable, and this capability testing is a very rigorous process. And when I ask this question, how do you find this? How people is capable of taking your legacy, or capable of taking and learning this black magic. So they didn't disclose this idea but they told her they will see and they will find. They used to see and they used to find how they whether they are capable or not. So for this thing, what kind of magical practice are practiced in monks, I have just pasted two videos here. So in both the videos, one is related to this magico-medicinal practices, where they one person named Tilak Hajarika, who is the Oja, Beige, what you can call, and is removing back pain of a person with the help of their magical power or magical mantra. On the other hand, on the other video, I have shown these magical practices. So you can watch and see the video. Nera, can you play the video? If anybody interested who is watching more videos, so the various documentaries have been made on YouTube, are available on YouTube. You can go back and see these magical practices practiced by these people in Mayans. Sound is not there, Niharika.
The sound is playing here, Rakesh.
But here I'm not able to hear. It's okay. The sound is also important. It's okay. Play. So here what is, I'll just give a commentary for this. Here what he did, he just stuck a copper plate with this people's back, and then he started throwing vibhuti along with the help of, with the like chanting with, along with chanting mantras and all, and then he started throwing very forcefully also. Just fast forward, Niharika, a little bit. And on this, no, it's okay. So he was keep doing until unless this plate didn't come back from this bag. So and after that, so here now he'll do, and he'll keep throwing until unless this plate will come back. And if the plate will come back, then this back pain is gone. It's over. And I have talked to these people also. Later he has verified his claim also in ethnographic data. So this is how this magic, this practice was done. Another magic. So this, if you watch this video, so here what is it? He has just bifurcated a stick into two, and then he again started jointing those sticks with the help of mantras. Play, Niharika, that. It's a very short video. Observe carefully. So here, see that here in this video, this stick has been like started jointing with each other. Go to the next slide. So this is how these kinds of magical beliefs are very much prevalent in this area. And many people know these kinds of magical practices. Not only Tilak Hajarika, but many people also. But Tilak Hajarika was one of the who came forward and to show these skills and all. Now we'll talk about what is the structure of magic and religion in Mayong. So as I've earlier told, this magic in Mayong has various kinds of religion. Sex was flourishing, and you know, in the side I start with this Sakta tradition. So here in the left hand side, there is a column, and along which column there are so many swords. This is a picture from this Kesai Khati. Kesai Khati literally means that one who eats raw. Raw means like one who eats raw. So here this temple is very much famous for this Bali or sacrifices, and ethnographic like oral narratives claims that the last human sacrifice was done at this place in I Than, another Than from like all the places related to this Shakti is called Than. So this Than, and then the sacrifice was also. And another is related to that. I'll tell a very nice story about these two places. When I went to these two places and I start and asked my friend who is accompanying with me, both are from Assam, only one is from that village also. So I asked him, can you come with me for this inside the temple and I can take the picture. None of them came inside the picture. They were so afraid to go inside the picture because this picture was so much associated with this black magic kinds of belief and practices. So they told that if I go there, I'll fall sick or something will happen to me. So I will not go. If you want to take picture, you go back. And if you observe carefully, there are so many rupees were there, like here in 10 rupees notes are there, that side beyond that, so 100 rupees notes are also there, but nobody is going to take that notes, even for money also they are not going. So they are so much afraid of these kinds of practices, even the village people itself also. Can you go to the next? So for the evidence of like sacrifices, nowadays like human sacrifices are not there, but various kinds of like animals were sacrificed in this village. Like and this village has one museum called Black Magic Museum or the Mayong Research Center. In that museum, they have kept the bones or from this all the sacrifice they used to make like tortoise shell or the femur or the head of the cattle. And along with that, this Shaktism was very much popular there. So Saivism was very much popular in that village, and there are so many these pithas were there. So and not only that Mayong, but in the geographical vicinity of this Mayong area also, one site is very 35 kilometers away from the Ambari site, which has been excavated by Archaeological Survey of India with the help of Guwahati Circle. So they have found several these pithas were there. And this when I tried to find out why there are so much pithas, then I found out this Kapalikat and Kalamukha has a tradition called Bhagasana Satha in the tantric practices. And for Bhagasana Satha, it's not really possible. Literally, if you go for this sitting on vulva and try to get penance, but it's not. Also for the symbolic meaning of Bhagasana Satha, they used to make this and they used to sit on that and they used to practice this kind of way. And this Naga cult was also very much prevalent because this Naga cult is always associated with this, many times associated with this fertility cult and this Mayong. And sorry, Kamakhya's temple is also associated with the fertility. So Naga culture are very much prevalent in this area also. Can you go to the next slide? Now this Saivism has also like I have showed this Kesai Khade temple. So in front of Kesai Khade temple there is two engravings where there one is from this Har Gauri like Shiva and Parvati, another is Ganesha. So and this if you see the placement of this sculpture, so Har Gauri was depicted above the pond and the Ganesha was depicted inside the pond. And we all know that the mystical origin of Ganesha, how this Parvati has created Ganesha when she was going for the bath and then she wants somebody to, as a gatekeeper, so she created Ganesha and all. So there are so many stories, this kind of story is very much prevalent in this kind related to black mystical origin or magical practices in the Mayong village itself. Can you go to the next slide? So I'm just giving a brief idea. Now this picture here, this picture is very much important. This picture I'm not able to, if anybody from expert in iconography and all, I'd love to hear from them. So I was not able to identify this name of this deity or Yaksha or Yakshini, whatever you call. I'm not very aware of this nomenclature, but if you observe very carefully of this, so in the left hand side, the woman or deity is in one hand she is capturing parrot or pigeon, on the other hand she is carrying maxilla, human maxilla. So and we all know this how this and another picture where the yogi kind of deity she is carrying doll in one hand and the maxilla on the other hand. And we all know this use of doll or parrot for the sympathetic magic where so it's good. The belief goes like that in doll. When I try to find out what is the belief behind that, so they used to tell that they used to take any part related to the object, and what I told is what Andrew Clifford has also talks about the sympathetic magic, where like for like, when you like try to harm somebody, you just take the cloth and the part will be work as a whole for the body, and then hair for or nail or cloths. So when I was doing this research, I was in Pune, so I came to know of one of the river that's called Mula Mutha. And in Mula Mutha river, so this river is very famous for this black magical siddhi and all. So and then I started going continuously to the river bank to see whether I can find out some evidence is not. And you say this right hand side upper image. So I found many times I didn't get this time like this closer picture, but many times I found this they made this doll made from cow dung or several materials, and then they, along with that they used to paste pin inside the doll. And then associate cloths or hair along with that. So not only this prevalent or is in theoretical sense also, but in iconographic form also we found the use of doll or parrot for sympathetic magic, as well as this material culture also we found. Though this kind of magical practices is very much private and found it's very difficult to find the material culture associated with this practice, because people used to do and they hide the materials to approach from this normal ordinary people. But still, we can find these kinds of material culture associated with black magical practices. Next slide. So another two sculpture, one is tribal Durga, the right hand side, and left hand side I'm not able to identify the goddess name, but people say this is also related to this magical practices on itself. And all these four sculpture I have showed here has been excavated during the Ambari excavation. That time period goes back to 7 to 12th century CE. So now comes to this material. What is because I've talked this material, it's very difficult to find material culture from this for magical practices, because it's private kind or individualistic kind of approach. So material, not only material culture, symbolism was also very much popular, very much part of this magical practices. People used to, because we have, you can say, take example like making a doll. This is also part of symbol also, because we are making a symbolic of a whole body in the form of dolls or Bodo, whatever we can name. So Julian Rice in her book called The Origin of Religions, he talks about the human journey from Homo symbolicus to Homo religious, how human became Homo symbolicus. Earlier he was Homo symbolicus. Homo symbolicus, he means by that, he means grasping capacity from invisible by means of visible things. So not only that in the sense of making symbols or diagrams, but symbolism was prevalent in the form of codified language, mantras, or sometimes they used to remember mantras in making a just symbol, not the script, so that other people cannot decipher those kinds of mantras and will not get access to this kinds of knowledge. And symbolism was not only limited to psychology. Various psychologists have also went back and like talks about the rhythm of the mantra they used to practice, like in difference in the tone and all, and which are capable of causing different kinds of hormones and all, and which leads to different kinds of position or explain the different psychological behavior. But I am not going to this because I'm not expert of psychology, so I will not talk about that kind of this symbology. But I'll talk about symbology which is related to the symbols and all. Can you go to the next? So we all very much familiar about this symbol called Star of David, and it's very much popular in all tantric activity as well as black magic practices. So various for this symbol also various scientists have tried to define this symbol from various scientific theory as well as this sociological point of view also. So one theory that Kujula Kalyan has developed a model and says that the fifth dimension of space and time can be portrayed in this. It's very simplified form of the fifth dimension can be portrayed in this kinds of thing. So, but I'm again not going to deal with this. But why I bring this symbol here? Because when I was visiting this mountain, we found like various petroglyphs drawn on this Kakshosila or in the forest of these kinds of symbol and associated with various kinds of another symbols are also. Can you go to the next slides? So one of the symbols which which is drawn in the Kakshosila, it's on the kun, with the left hand side, there is a kun called Yoni kun, and that Yoni kun, on the top of the Yoni kun, the symbol of chakras, Sad chakra or 6-arm chakra has been drawn. And then people believe that this chakra is related to some of these magical practices. Can you go to the next? Again, in the same hill, again a chakra associated with bone and a trident. And the chakra is not simple chakra. This Padma chakra along with this pedestal was drawn, and people also, because this bone and trident, people associate these symbols with this tantric Saiva cult, and then that this people used to come here and practice black magic or tantric activity, because this is inside the forest and out from this common people reach. Next slide. So I was talking about this use of like symbology in mantra. As you can see this upper picture, like top picture of this left hand side, where the magician has drawn an image, but he has not drawn associated any mantra. When I asked this question, why, what is the purpose of this image? This is a mantra. I told, how can you remember this is how can you say this is mantra? So this is a mantra which I will remember. I will find out what is the coding or decoding of this mantra. So then I go, why do you draw these kinds of views? So just if I'll write in a Samya language, so people, if I'll die or if I will be not there, people can access to this kind of mantra. But if I draw this in form of symbology, so only I have the power to access those kind of mantra. And this was happening very much in the Mayang. So after this magician used to write, a family member or the people of this associated with those close circles, they used to like collect those mantra putris. Mantra putris called like where this mantra used to capture in the book and destroy this mantra into the river and all. So this kind of activity was very much prevalent, and this symbology in black magic was not centered to again India. And one excavation like burial excavated from in Thailand, and that burial has covered with a cloth, and that cloth has so many like magical symbology and mantras written and engraved on that. And then mantras was like symbology was not only associated with mantras or this with petrograms, but symbology in the form of amulets or talisman, give jantar mantar and all. So people used to like magician used to write, or the healer used to write these mantras and in the paper, and they used to insert that paper inside this box and then fill with this wax and all. And then they claim that this kinds of mantras is very useful for healing purposes or whatever purposes they used to use. Can you go to the next slide? Now come to this topic of the symbol. We talks about symbology, we talks about this, and now what is the importance of material culture? So material culture is very much important because all the abstract thing is abstract. We cannot find evidence until and unless we will not get a concrete medical evidence. So we cannot reconstruct those kinds of belief without this concrete material culture. So material culture is basically a translation of our belief systems in a very concrete forms, which draws meaning and cognition associated with those kinds of medical. So it's both ways, material as a medium of adoration or appeasement, as well as transferring this opposite vibration power or energy from one person to another. As for example, like using hair, we use this material as a hair, and then we try to give like harm or whatever, heal somebody with the help of that kind of material. So material culture are also very much important in the black magic practices, as well as this symbolism are also very much prevalent in this kinds of black magic practices. Can you go to the next slide? So, but again, now one very like what you call the sad part of this our intangible heritage culture is that people from the socio-economic point of view, what even in last 10, 12 years, like starting this data is available, the graph I have made is from this data has been published by this India Today. So this graph shows that from between 2000 to 2014, almost 1,000 people has been killed by associating them that these people know this black magic or witchcraft, and whole village people or the individual level at also, like they used to kill those kinds of people who and claiming that those people knows black magic and kill somebody else. So this is really very sad part, and sociologists and anthropologists have talked like vastly about this kind of activity. So I'm not going to talk what is the socio-cultural implication of black magic and how this black magic, but this kinds of is also prevalent. When one hand we say that black magic is our legacy or intangible heritage culture, on the other hand these are the sad part associated with this black magic on the name of murder, killing and all. So lynching. Can you go to the next slide? Now the question comes, then why this, when you talk, is there negative perception in common psychology or consciousness about this black magic? Why this black magic is? So there are various regions. So I have highlighted some of the regions. One is that this Mayong as a village. I will first talk about Mayong and then I will go for the gender. So when we started, Mayong was very geographically, if you see this very near to this Guwahati, and due to this Pavithora Wildlife Sanctuary, it's very porous for the people who are outsiders. So it's very difficult now to find out what is original and what is not original. And then now people associated with this kind of practices started like false information, and you can see that poster. So here in that sense, this Azad Baba Azad Bengali and all. So and 11-time gold medalist. So these kind of fake claims they used to make to show their powers with their various posters or propagation or advertisement. So these kind of associated with the faith, and then and all this kinds of fake is also related with this economy, because they used to claim that if you give me some 50,000 rupees, like I'll make some this person in your bus, I'll do this, I'll do that. So this kind of, when this magic practice is associated with this economy and money, so this started becoming corrupting. Like this magical practice started corrupting with this help of or is the prevalent of economy attached with. Earlier, magician was not very economic oriented or the money oriented. They do not take money when they do practice this magical practices. But these times people have like pulled it into money and these false make claims. So this was the one reason, and then the development of technology or another reason. I earlier told us how this technology approach culture, and this magical belief is separated from this religion and then started segregating. So education, modern facilities, medical services. When medical services are prevalent, so people stop going to this magician and so they start. So this kind of things, and very much this dogmatization by this popular media and all. We see the lynching and all are the result of that kinds of behavior. So these are the things, condition which in the background, which and another important from the history if you take. So this in 11th, 12th century, one Vaishnavism cult called Namgarh, like Nam culture, like so from Vaishnavism. So this was very much prevalent in Mayong still now also, because then these people of this sect do not believe in sacrifice or in any kind of hinsa. So prevalent of started growing up this Namgarh cult or this Vaishnavism has also a greater impact of reducing or decreasing this magical or medicinal force in the Mayong. Can you go to the next slide? So now the question comes. Okay, like we have talked about this, what black magic is, whether it is existing, its existence, it can be verified or not verified, whether what is the role of symbology in that. But now the question, what can be done for like to avoid such kind of fake magicians or to conjure our intangible heritage culture. So first of all, we have to go for this very basic level to study very well with this dichotomy of the magic and religion, because very few work has been done from this, whether this work has been on magic was done from this ethnographic point of view or the religious point of view. But when there's a proper analogy between magic and religion, dichotomy is not very well studied. So people, so we can go and well study this dichotomy and polarity, and again this the magic has individual. I told this individual and private ritual substance and material culture will be there. So now it's our job to go for this, because I am from archaeology. So as an archaeologist, I'll go for post-processual approach, which believes in symbology, meaning, subjectivity, and all, and then try to decode those kinds of meaning or symbols hidden in the mantras or hidden in the behavior or hidden in the tone or hidden in the practice, to decode their actual nature or decode their practices in many great detail. Again, then we have to think it's very differently. It's not as a sinister to religion and all, but we have to take magic as a part of our intangible heritage culture, because it's a legacy of our ancestral belief and practices. When we start practice and conserving those, when preserving those in the form of intangible heritage culture, so this work can be done from this point of view, from heritage point of view. And then people can also, like people who are interested in linguistics or ethnicity and all, it has a very vast opportunity. People from, because if we analyze this mantras and transition in mantras, so it's a very, because these people who are like mantra puthis, which I have encountered in the Mayong, so they were written in Kaithali script, and none of those villagers or the people around that village is able to read the Kaithali script, that is old Assami language and Kaithali script. So and then when I went for this earlier research on the Mayong, and then I found this how this mantra has been like itself has went through a transition, starting from the poetic to this, again this poetic to verse, and then it's prose kinds of mantras. So transition in mantras, and then see word is used in mantras like word of Manipuri or something like that. So there is a very large scope for people who can try to work from the ethnicity and language person. And then on the very last but not the least things we can do, we will stop dogmatizing these practices as very sinister to religion and all. We should change our approach towards this black magic from the cultural heritage point of view. So next. So before I end this slide, my talk here, so I'll end my talk with this quote by Roald Dahl. So it says that above all, watch with glittering eyes the whole world around you, because the greatest secrets are always hidden in the unlikely places. Those who do not believe in magic will never find it. Thank you very much. Next. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rakesh. Thank you for such a good presentation. So, if I may, this was a dissertation topic for Rakesh in his masters when he did that in Deccan College. So, I request questions and comments from everyone. So, yeah, Sujan, if you are here, you can ask your question. Yeah, please go on.
Yeah, I was wondering, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
hear you. Good.
Yeah, I was wondering when you had mentioned that the tribe, the teacher judges if the person is capable or not,
Yeah.
and then gets him going.
Yeah.
So is there, have you heard from the tribe if it's possible for a person who is not capable of performing black magic to become capable of performing black magic?
Yeah, so this is very interesting question. When I ask this question, so see, not capable and becoming capable, it's all because this black magic is handing over by direct felicitation, what I told is from generation to another generation. So selecting this capability or not capability depend on the guru. Whether guru will find this man is capable or not capable, only then he will teach that kind of medical and magical practices to this. When guru itself find not capable, then there is no, because on the first and only, the very first premises we negate this possibility. If somebody guru find is not non-capable, then how can he practice black magic? Because guru doesn't find him capable, so he won't teach him. So how will from he learn? From where he learn? So this is what.
Okay, thank you, Rakesh. Okay, there are two questions by Shivi Shetty. I think I'm trying to unmute her, but I think there's a problem. I'll just read out her questions to you. The first question is there any connection between magic and Ayurveda?
Yeah. So magic and see, if Ayurveda is considered as the one of the 8 upanga of Atharveda, and Atharveda practices because Vaisajya is Ayurvedic practices, and Avicharika was another one of the part of this Atharveda. So in that sense, if you, this both have originated from the same kind of Vedic culture, and so both are very different kinds of modeling. If you call this Ayurveda, Ayurveda also sometimes is basically related with herbs and all, whereas this magic is related with this both the material as well as this mantras. So both have their different kinds of methodology for approaching or for practices or diagnosis. So for me, this is what I think, because what I think that magic and Atharveda both have their origin in the Atharveda itself. Sorry, Ayurveda. So this is what connection I am able to make right now.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Rakesh. Okay, the next question is by Sukanya. Sukanya, please go on.
Yeah. Thank you, Rakesh, for the wonderful presentation. It was really nice because you shared your all field experience and all. So I would like to know that, like, what is the purpose of black magic, especially in your study area, rather than the healing? You mentioned that it is for healing, right?
Yeah,
Am I
yeah.
audible?
Yeah, you are audible. Yeah. So purpose. What is the purpose of black magic? Again, I told us this very much definition in the definition itself. What categorization black magic itself is that only. When you try to harm, because when you segregate, for me, like differentiation between this black magic and white magic is it depend on the purpose itself. Black magic is itself for this when you try to harm somebody or try to get spread disease in somebody, and whereas white magic is where you try to heal somebody and do something. So this very definition is itself is the purpose. So this is what purpose of black magic is. And for doing my research, so for what I choose is black magic, because I was from archaeology background, and when I came across this burials and rock art practices, so then I got interested, and then I went for this black magic.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Rakesh. Thank you, Sukanya, for the question. There are some compliments, comments for you, Rakesh. And Raju has a question. He's asking, why is this magical practice so prevalent in Assam?
Yeah, so as we know that Assam is a place where like not only this is not only prevalent in Assam, so it is prevalent in Kerala is more than Assam. If you go for this Mandravin tradition and all, so Kerala is in that sense is top than Assam. Assam is like, and why these two states? Because these two states are more tribal people who are indigenous people living in the forest away from this techno cultural in that sense, and we have lots of tribes. So one reason could be that because of their indigenous tribes and their prevalent indigenous tribes are there. Like if you take for the Assam, so there are 130 major tribal community living in Assam. So we know that the tribal community does not have this. They believes in natural gods, spirits. So in that sense, and whatever we do not understand, but whatever we do not find something different from our culture, we associate with this magical or sinister power or kinds of belief. Even for when I was doing this research in indigenous healing tradition, so whatever their belief in gods or their beliefs in worshipping this hill god, trees and all, they all know this is related to this magical or beliefs in magic or superstitions or supernatural powers. Because when we don't find this model which is similar to our model, so we just try to define or categorize under this kinds of model magic or something like that.
Okay. Thank you, Rakesh. Sakshi has a very interesting question. She's asking, is there some record of how medicine or religious practices are being used for COVID?
Ma'am, see, since COVID, everybody is locked down in the room, so I cannot say that Magico has COVID or not. So once you will go after field work and then say that whether people were affected by this, who believes in magic or not, only then I can say. And then I don't think this kinds of question is itself valid in that sense. Sorry to say that, but because see, in the very first slide I was told about this existence and non-existence of magic is very, very difficult to prove because we have not axioms which can verify or disverify these kinds of belief. So in that sense, it's a little bit tricky kind of question with this medical practices existing. So if this question basically notion in the cell is existing, then only it can like cure or not cure.
Okay. Thank you, Rakesh. I request Professor Thakur to please go ahead with your question. Professor Mehed. Yes, sir. Sir, you're not audible. I'm sorry, sir, but you're not audible.
Sir, you are muted.
Sir, we still can't hear you.
Now?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Okay, since the microphone was not working. All right. Thank you, Rakesh, for this presentation. And I joined slightly late, but I could understand your argument fairly well, I guess. And I would request you to send me the recorded version to access it twice and so that I can capture it properly. I think the way you have connected the archaeological evidences tells a lot of things about how this knowledge was being practiced. In fact, I see this very differently. I would like to see this as knowledge in practice. Like this tantric knowledge is not isolated tribal knowledge. There is a huge amount of literature that is already available. And my hunch is that it is pre-Hindu civilization, which was gradually accommodated within Hinduism, which was being practiced and gradually pushed towards the hillside. So the mainstream became quite anti this gradually. And since it was very powerful, because there is no difference between mind and body, it is a game of the consciousness also, which people don't understand. So therefore they call it black magic because the science thing is not available to explain that. So they call it black magic. The other thing is that, somebody asked about why it is there in Assam. Interestingly, I would like you to explore this idea. Assam was called Prag-Jyotispur.
Yeah.
And if you go to Navagraha area, that is the natural observatory of natural things. I mean, the celestial things. So probably this region was already inhabited by some people of that kind who would go there and stay there. Those who are interested in working on those themes from all over the country, maybe from some part of the Arab world also, Because interestingly, tantrics in Mayang are not only Hindus; they are also.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what I could see was when I visited there and had long discussion with them, that 9th century, probably around 9th century, it was a bigger hub of this kind where people from Arab world also used to come. So it looks like it was a natural space for that kind of knowledge tradition where they could try to understand. And a lot of things I think is added later on. This lot of rituals that you were showing, it looks like as if that became part of this tradition very late. I'm not sure of it, but it looks like that. Uh, Second thing is that, third thing rather, is that this uh, Gorakhpur and Kamakhya linkage. So Gorakhpanthi sadhus, in fact, they used to go from Kamakhya to, Gorakhpur to Kamakhya on foot. So the route was, one of my students was trying to cover that route, who has worked on Gorakhpur. And he has discovered that in many parts, there are temples of Gorakhnath and Kamakhya. So it is also entirely possible that these Gorakhpanthis, they took a lot of things there and transformed that or brought that to the mainstream. Similarly, Assam, as I said, that it's Pragjyotispur, we were just trying to observe that almost every Assami, the local Assami, believes in Jyotish too much. They all are having some rings or other. Any professor I talk in JNU who is from Assam and Asmi could tell me that yes, we were also trained in some mantra when we were child. So probably that's a part of the culture. I have some questions, but I will refrain from asking at this moment. Maybe some other people have to raise a lot of questions. Then I'll come back at the end if there is some time. Thank you very much, Rakesh.
Thank you, sir, for your presence and wonderful suggestion. I will definitely work on that. And this Pragjyotispur, I was aware of this fact, this Pragjyotispur, but I couldn't find like too much reference in this literature. That's why I was not able to like whatever I find is modern only this like article by Lokendra Jarika or D.K. Barua or D.K. Kalita and all. So they have all mentioned these kinds of research. But because I am from archaeology background, so I will go for this very ancient kinds of bibliographical evidence or the ancient text. So it's very wonderful, sir. I'm very like pleased that you came here. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir, for the comments, and thank you, Rakesh. Okay, we have one more question. It's like a comment with like a question within a comment, I think. It's by Praveen. So he's asking like when we talk about history, so we can accumulate great knowledge by talking to people, but that doesn't give much of a or great clarity, he says, and experimenting with it and verifying it will know how true it is. So he's saying even the degree of truth is different. So he's asking is, I think what he is asking is experiment and verifying it will bring more clarity, or uh, the literature itself will do that.
See, I have already mentioned, like addressed this question in at two different levels. First, I have defined this magic is very much private kind of individualistic kinds of rituals, which is and people used to practice and then they used to hide this their material culture associated with that. So finding this material culture or historical like archaeological remains which can be verified, so it's a little bit tricky. And then the other thing is that all the materials used in this are mostly organic in nature. So it's very difficult to find in archaeological excavation. And as far as literature is concerned, so yeah, definitely the exploring literature can be verified. But the very first exams like why we need to give a very go for this logical empiricist model of verifying with this physical evidence, because I've told this sometimes magic is also a place at the very psychological level or experiential level, and for experiential level it's proving that experience whether this is true or not true, it's very much difficult because we don't have axioms to prove that. We cannot develop axioms for experience or qualia. So it's very much tricky. It's a very tricky kind of thing to prove or disprove these kinds of magical or cultural practices. But thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rakesh. Praveen, I think, okay, This is what I understood of his questions, so I asked you. So I'll now request Meera Kumar Menon, the chairperson of today's talk, also a doctoral scholar with Team CSP, to please proceed with her comments.
Thank you, Niharika. Very, very nice talk, Rajesh. You connected everything so beautifully. So I want to say that we are working in similar but slightly different areas. So I am working on a Mantravada tradition in Kerala, which is not exactly black magic. And my research area is more to do with Sun Mantravada, which is more to do with healing and so forth. I couldn't help but notice, this is an insight from my field work. One of the practitioners told me that if you were to explain magic through logic, then it ceases to become faith. So I'm talking in the context of faith healing. So if you give a logical explanation to what is done, then it stops becoming faith and it ends up becoming science of some sort. So I wanted to know, like, the practices which you are showing in Mayang, for instance, especially where they are using the stick and then, you know, splitting it and all that. Do they give some sort of a logical or fictional explanation to it? Like, where is the agency rooted? Like, is it in the person who is doing it? Is it in some gods? Is there a fictional story behind it? Like, what is the explanation that they give, or is there no explanation at all? Who has the power here? Is it just the magical person, or I mean, the occult practitioner, or is it the gods or somebody else?
So it's a very nice question, Meera. Here are two things we have first identified. Here, what in like showing the skills in the splitting the bamboo and then again joining the bamboo. So this kind of experience, so they don't give such kind of this key, but their beliefs, what they call as, first of all, this belief system is very important. What I call this magical belief, and the magical and this belief system is associated with this supernatural God as well as the power of mantra and the capability of whatever this healer or great. So if mantra is also powerful and the deity is powerful, but a healer is not qualified to practice or is not sit in that sense, he'll not able to. So agency lies in both as mantra as well as the healer itself. So.
And I wanted to ask just one more thing. When these healers, when you are in the field, do you feel that they completely believe in what they're doing, in the sense that they're completely in lieu with the whole belief system in mantra, in black magic, or is it that they also realize to some extent that, you know, there must be some sort of a theatrics in it? Do they feel it that way, or is it just that they're completely immersed and faithful in what they're doing?
So it's a very interesting question, Meera. So here again, two things are there. One is that few people who completely believes in that, and few ujhas and beds, they are working as a fourth grade employee in the medical hospital also.
Okay.
So it's very interesting case study for that. They used to work in the hospital also, and they used to practice. So sometimes they associate with this magical practice, and in some case they used to disassociate from this practices and belief, and they used to go for like work in the medicinal and then try to explain this medicinal value. So these both things are there. People like Tilak Hajarika's video also, he is completely into this black magic, like power of mantrin or Sadmantrvada or Durmantrvada. So he is completely into that. But whereas people like I'll not take name because he particularly insisted to give his name, like not to give his name and all. So I'm not. But he was not. He was a fourth grade employee in the hospital in Mayong, and then he was practicing magic also.
I was asking this because even from my field work, I see that there are Ayurveda doctors who are also from traditional families which practice Mantravada, and they still continue to do and even mix Ayurveda with Mantravada. And there are some explanations also which they give, saying that, you know, Ayurveda does suggest that, you know, some amount of Mantravada is okay for treatment, especially when it comes to mental health practices and all that. So which is why I asked this question. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Meera.
Thank you, Meera, for the comments and also for the questions. Amruta, would you like to ask a relating question? Yeah, please go on.
Thank you, Rakesh, for that very insightful lecture. So my question is related to what Meera have asked. like with respect to what she said about Mantravada in Kerala, when I was also like interested in knowing, like when you talk about Mantravada, there was some like, for example, Kuttichatan as a deity, that they believe the authorship to that Kuttichatan when it comes to Mantravada tradition. But to the North Kerala, you have the same the Kuttichatan or that deity, but there when it comes to the like ritual performances and all, that the authorship is taken from that Kuttichatan or that particular deity, and to that of the like, not to the deity they have given. Like for example, when it comes to Mantravada and all, it is the person who's also doing is like capturing the powers of that particular deity, and they are able to do it with the help of that particular spirit or whatever they are believing in. But when it comes to performances in North Kerala, you have like the power is given to the spirit as such, or the deity that they're worshipping. So is there such like relationship that you could find with the in Assam? Like for example, the performances that they are separated from the ritual practices that is there.
It's very nice question, Amu, but unfortunately, like I cannot answer it because I have not participated in any performance related. But one of the performance is that the Devdhani performance. The picture I have shown in the second last slide, where this guy is carrying this sword and then with one hand, like one shoulder, this goat and all. But I'm not very aware. I'm not done on this performance point of view. What kind of I'm not able to get a chance to interview those kinds of people, or so I cannot say that. In future, I might answer you, but if I go back and ask those questions.
Thank you so much, Rakesh. Professor Thakur, do you have any other questions? Professor Thakur? Okay, yeah. Yeah, so can you please unmute yourself?
Unmute. Yeah. Am I unmuted now?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So
So,
you can please.
Rakesh, yeah, can I ask a small question, not very important,
Yeah.
that did you witness any of the practitioners sadhana that they do? What kind of sadhana do they do? Because I could not find anything. Like, they explained something to me, but I did not see them doing any sadhana. Whereas if you go to Calcutta, Tarapit, etc., you can get some people doing the sadhana. Here, I think they were like absolutely normal human being, teaching in a school, doing sub job, and also becoming a kind of baz or something, what you call them. So did you see something like that?
No, sir. Unfortunately, I'm also agreeing with you only because when I was taking interview of this Tilak Hajarika and then another like healer, so they used to explain there like these kinds of qualities will be there, this kind of sadhana is needed, these kinds of belief should be there. But I didn't observe that whether they are doing it or not. Though like in Tilak Hajarika has made one temple in his courtyard only, and he says that he used to worship in the morning and they used to do sadhana there. But in their working activities, there's no resemblance with their what they used to tell this kind of thing. So yeah, you are true, sir. I have not observed this kind of thing. But in like when I went to this Rampur Heart Temple and Dharapet and all, there I have seen that when Agoris they are doing practicing sadhana and all. But here it's not.
No, they don't.
Yeah, they don't.
He told me, Tilak Hajarika told me one small thing, that and there was one person who used to get involved in sadhana and he lost his probably he got paralyzed or something while doing sadhana. So he explained me what happens in that when you try to control the Atma or some Jeev. He had a very nice explanation of the whole thing. But then I asked him to give me the address, or I would like to meet that person. He said, you cannot meet him. So I could not see anybody of that kind. Whereas you go to Mela, that Mela in Kamakhya, there you find a lot of such people.
Yeah, correct, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your questions and comments. So I'll just read out one last comment of today's session as we're running a little ahead of time. Ayan has to say that I hope the knowledge we all gain today will heal the object of this discussion. Often the will to know is a will to colonize, to rule the other. It is said that anthropology itself came out of this will. So I think when it comes to will and anthropology, I'll just give it back to Meera and Rakesh to understand the meaning. So thank you everyone for such a great evening. Thank you Rakesh for taking such a controversial topic and making it so easy for all of us to understand. So thank you. And thank you everyone in the audience to participate with us like for each Friday lectures and making it a success. So thank you everyone on behalf of Professor Sangeeta Menon, also team CSP. Have a great evening. We'll see you next Friday. Thank you.